the basics for navigating GoToWebinar for folks that may not be familiar with it.
Perfect. Well, good afternoon, everyone. And kind of as we do with all of our webinars, we put everyone on mute, as Anthony mentioned. And it's just to avoid all the distraction and all the background noise that happens. But what we do is we go through the sessions on your control panel there on your computer when you went into the webinar. There's a section called questions. And if you just expand that section, you can go in there and type in any question you like. And I'll be kind of the moderator here, and I'll be moderating that question area. And as you submit that question, I'll be either answering back to you or kind of funneling them back to Anthony to bring them up during our session today. So once again, just use those questions. I know there's a little raise hand option that a few of the users were trying to use yesterday, and that doesn't work the same way. You have to actually go into questions, type in your question, and submit that, and we'll address it from there. But other than that, Anthony, I guess we're ready to roll.
All right, thank you, sir. Well, one thing I do want to mention, there's a lot of material here to cover. So for those of you that have not been in Hubble yet, or navigated through any of the other dashboards that we've produced. In the event this seems a little overwhelming, I'll just offer one suggestion. We've got a lot of your colleagues have started to use it at all levels of the organization, and it's just one of these things that takes a little bit of hands-on. So don't be shy. It's difficult in a webinar like this where you can't get direct feedback from people and see their faces wince when they don't understand something. So I apologize for that, but with the large number of people on the line, this is really the only format that kind of works. So please do put in a question, even if it's stopped, and tell Anthony to go over that again or whatever. And on top of that, this is such an important tool for us. If you are struggling to use it or don't quite understand it, just get a hold of Christian, and we're happy to do one-on-ones or one with you and a couple of your colleagues if you'd like to do a more intimate setting where you can ask questions and so forth as well. So we're happy to do that, whatever we need to do to make you guys successful. But don't, if you don't quite get it, because I do have to go kind of fast in the interest of time to move through this. And it's really intended to be an overview just to make sure you can get in there and start playing with it yourself, which honestly is the only way you're ultimately going to really learn it and get comfortable with it. I'm on the monthly labor forecast dashboard now. What I do want to point out, because it's the first two things we're going to go through, is right on the monthly labor forecast dashboard on this instructions page gives you a little overview of what the labor forecast is all about. But there's also these two little hyperlinks. One is a monthly labor forecast guide that's stored up on Gateway. But when you click on it here, it'll open up in another window, so you can literally review the help right online, as well as a deal on basic Hubble navigation, which is what we're going to look at first. Now, I've already clicked on these, so they're already open. So I'm going to click right up here where it says Hubble navigation. And this is the PDF file to kind of walk you through the basic functions within Hubble. Now, what I'm showing you here applies to the ePay compliance workspace. It applies to the monthly labor forecast. And these same techniques will be applicable in any other workspaces that we introduce over time. Our expectation down the road is we'll be producing one so you can look at your P&Ls, one for purchasing to identify items on back order, et cetera, over time. We have two today, and we'll be producing a number over the next year. So taking the time to get comfortable with Hubble is pretty important, because this can be a big part of a tool used principally for operators and field management rather than having to go into the transaction systems like ePay and JD Edwards. So I'm going to cover some terms, show you how to log into Hubble if you haven't done so. Hubble's made up of a bunch of workspaces, and when we create a new one or when we change one that's already out there, as you've probably seen in an email from myself or Christian where we shared a workspace with you, I'm going to show you how to add that workspace to your environment so you can start using it. Once you have a workspace, you obviously have to open it, so we'll walk through that. And then once you have it open, you're going to move from page to page within a workspace, ultimately get to a list, and when you get to a list, we'll teach you how to drill down from that list to lower levels of lists to get down to the lowest level of detail that you might be interested in seeing. And then finally, from any one of those lists, how to export that list to Excel. So if you're able to do these 6 things here, you can use any of the Hubble dashboards quite easily because they all work the same way. And these 6 actions are the most common. But just quickly on some terms. So when we refer to a workspace, the monthly labor forecast is a workspace. E-pay compliance is a workspace. So every one of these unique things is a workspace, very similar to, like, say, an Excel workbook. And a workspace is comprised of one or more pages, just like a screen or a screen in a workspace. That's what a page is. Think of a page within a workspace as the same way of a worksheet or a tab within Excel. Probably a good way to think about it. And then every page is comprised of anywhere from 1 to 8 little boxes or panels. And each one of those little sections of that page composes some information, either coming from ePay, coming from J.D. Edwards, or even another source. So that's what a panel is. It just includes some information. So you'll see charts, metrics, lists, or like that information page panel I was showing you before, just has text in it. So these are the different types of panels. There's a chart. So a chart is going to look like a graph. And from that chart, you can click down and see the list that makes up that graph. Then there's metrics, and we'll demonstrate this. A metric is basically a picture also, but it just has a single number on it. A metric is also tied to a list. When you click on the metric, it'll bring up the list that's associated with that metric so you can see the detail. And then you can have a list directly in a panel as well, or you can drill down from either one of these guys to a list. A list is just like Excel on the web. So it's one or more columns or rows of data, and anytime you're on a list, you can right-click from that list to bring up a menu that allows you to drill down, which is the terminology, to another list. And when you do that right-click, you'll see a menu similar to this appear with the choices that you can drill down to. And you simply choose that, and it'll open up that lower-level list. And then finally, the text or image panel, which is just informational. There's no list associated with it. The other thing you will notice in Hubble is when you open up a page or you switch from page to page or a new workspace, in the lower right-hand corner, if you see the little, what looks like an hourglass or a process thing kind of winding, that means it's still loading the data from J.D. Edwards or ePay or wherever for that particular page or that particular panel. And again, if you have any questions, please write them in there, and Christian will let me know. So to log into Hubble, you go to hubble.us.issworld.com/Hubble, and you can do this in Internet Explorer or Chrome or Firefox or whatever you're using. Unlike, say, Insight or J.D. Edwards, you do not have to be in a VPN or on a company computer to get into Hubble. You can get to it from anywhere, anytime. But you go to this URL, and when you get there, it's going to ask you for your username and your password. Your username is going to be your full email address, jane.doe@us.issworld.com. One thing it's important to know, this is not your email password. Hubble has a special password, so you have your own unique Hubble password that will be distinct from your email one. So don't try to use your email one, it won't work. And then finally, after you put in your username and your password, just click sign on, and that's all you need to do to connect into Hubble. Now, when you log into Hubble, you're always going to see what's called the hub or the main page, which looks similar to this. It's got a bunch of little panels in here, special panels with messages and stats and so forth. We're not really using any of this functionality right now. The only piece that's relevant is this center one where it says notifications. So anytime somebody shares a workspace with you, so if we had a new version of the monthly labor forecast, you would get an email from us, from Hubble actually, but initiated by Christian or myself, saying Anthony Lackey has shared monthly labor forecast version 2 with you. So when you log into Hubble the next time, all you do is you click here in the notifications tab, and it'll bring up a pop-up window showing you your most recent notifications. And to open that new version, all you do is click on the hyperlink on that row that you want to open. And that's how you open or add a new shared workspace to your environment so you can use it. Now, once you've added something to your environment, like the monthly labor forecast or ePay compliance, for example, these two, if you want to open it, because you can only have one workspace open at a time, on the far left side of the main Hubble page, there's a little tab, a little icon here that says Workspaces. When you click on it, it'll bring up a list of all your currently open workspaces. You simply select the workspace that you want to open. In this case, say I want to open ePay Compliance, I would click here, and the ePay Compliance workspace would open. If, however, you come to the Open Workspaces and you don't see a workspace that you know you had and it's not showing up, it may be that you closed it inadvertently or even purposefully. If you did close it, it's still available. All you have to do is click on Browse All, and then it'll bring up a pop-up window with all your available workspaces. So in this example, I did that, and maybe I wanted to get to this KPI All workspace, just one we're working on for you guys. I would click on this, and then it would add it to my open workspaces, and it would open it up so I could then start using it. When you get to a page in Hubble, say the opening page after you've opened a workspace, as I mentioned before, a workspace is comprised of one or more pages. If a workspace has multiple pages and you want to move from one page to another, there are two ways to do it. The first way is to use the table of contents. The table of contents, little drop down right up here just under the title of the workspace. You click on that, it'll bring up a pop-up window showing you all the pages on that workspace. And I like this method of moving page to page because you can also see actually what's on the page. So I can see that the fixed and square foot by category is on page 1. The fixed and square foot work orders are on page 3, and so on. And I can just quickly jump from page 1 to page 4 or page 5 simply by clicking on it, rather than having to go page to page. One of the challenges I mentioned down here of moving page to page is when you go from page 1 to page 2, say to page 3 and then page 4, if page 4 is ultimately where you want to go, when Hubble moves from page 1 to page 2, it has to do the refresh and reload the data for page 2 before you move to page 3. And the same thing when you move from 3 to 4. So if you do want to go from, say, just 1 to 6 or 6 back to 2 or whatever, simply use the drop down to bring up the table of contents, choose the page you want, and it will bring it up without having to worry about the delay of moving from page to page. The other way to do it, over here on the right side, is in the lower right-hand corner, you'll see right and left arrows and the page that you're on. And if I wanted to move from page 1 to page 2, I simply click right, and that's going to move me to page 2. If you're just moving from one page to another, or the next page of the previous, this is a good way to do it. But if you're jumping around and you want to jump to 3 or 4 pages away, then option 1 is a better approach. Either one will work. Now, drill downs, drilling down from a list. So imagine a list is similar to Excel, where you've got rows and columns of data. One of the interesting and nice things about Hubble is there's data sitting behind the data. So in this example, the list I have up is showing me all my contract labor summarized by company. So I'm looking at Memphis and Dallas and San Antonio. So what I would do at this point, if I want to drill down for San Antonio, I simply highlight San Antonio, click the right button on my mouse, and it will bring up this drill down menu and show me what choices I have. And in this example, I can choose to look at the San Antonio districts. Everything's summarized by district. I can look at San Antonio projects with all the labor summarized by project. I can look at individual jobs in San Antonio summarized, or in this example, I can also see my daily hours for the entire company. In this particular example, what I chose to do is I right-clicked and I said, let me see all the districts in San Antonio. And when I did that, you'll see that it showed me the 6 districts in San Antonio, District 1 through 6, or 7 of them here, and then the HEB district. Once I get to this page, if I want to go a level lower, in this case I wanted to go look at the jobs in District 1, so I right-clicked on this guy, and it gave me the choice to drill to my jobs, which I clicked on, and as I can see, my jobs within District 1 now appeared with the labor broken down by job. And at this point, if I want to go look at the timesheet, the daily hours, or the labor budget, etc., I simply right-click, it brings up the menu, and in this case I was going to click on timesheet, at which point it would have brought up the timesheet for Blossom Cove. The last thing I'll point out is as you drill down, these breadcrumbs get built out showing your path. So I started with company, then I went to district, then I went to job. If I want to look at another job within the district, I don't have to go all the way back to company and start over. I could simply click on this breadcrumb right here, and that will reopen my district list where I can pick another district and then drill down to the job if I want to do that. And then lastly, any of these lists at whatever level you're at, if you have a desire to export that information into Excel, and there's a couple of good reasons which we'll talk about why you will do that, but there's plenty of reasons why you might want to do that as well for yourself. Anytime you're on a list, the first thing you need to do is make sure the list is selected. And so what I do is I simply click anywhere in the list, and you will see these little dots appear around the perimeter of the list. Prior to that, there's no dots. So I kind of highlighted here in yellow for you. And then the little download menu icon shows up here, are these three dots up in the upper right-hand corner. So first thing I do is click on the list, the dots appear, I go up here, click on this icon, and the little menu appears, and the third option on the menu is Save to Excel. So I click on Save to Excel. It takes about anywhere from a half a second to 1 or 2 or 3 seconds to put the data into an Excel format depending on the size of the list. And then this little download button pops up letting you know that the files are ready for download, and you simply click on the download button and then the file will be downloaded to Excel for you to use. It'll look exactly the same way it does in the screen. The colors, the totals, the columns, etc. just dropped into an Excel file. Do we have any questions at this point, Christian? Okay. Moving right along then. Now I'm going to actually speak specifically about the monthly labor forecast. And again, this guide, as well as what I just showed you, is available right through the application by just clicking on those hyperlinks on the main page. So we're going to cover the following: the expected use and intended purpose of the monthly labor forecast. We're going to talk about some an overview and features specifically of this product, and then tell you where the data is coming from. I think it's important that you all have a pretty good understanding of where the data is coming from, what's included and not included and why, and then we'll talk a little bit about why we separate the fixed and square foot jobs from the square foot jobs, and then finally explain the rules that we use to calculate the janitorial production rates. The first thing is expected use and intended purpose. So this tool was developed specifically for operations management. While financial directors and other folks in your staff may use it, it's really was developed with the idea of the folks that are running our jobs every day, providing them visibility into our performance at a job level in a simple way across whatever book of business you're responsible for. So 5 to 20 minutes a day, presented in an exception format, so you can go in there and find those exceptions and do something about them. So everything from managing director through a DM and all the roles in between would have one reason or another to take a look at this. Your access, by the way, into the monthly labor forecast is based on whatever data you're able to see in JD Edwards. So if you're seeing too much, maybe you are set up with access to 3 or 4 companies and you really don't need access to those 3 or 4 companies, just let us know. We can adjust your access. If you don't see certain jobs you should see for the same reason, the same thing. There's a form for JD Edwards access, and they're going to see an email from us probably either this evening or tomorrow morning introducing some new electronic forms for changing access that I think you're all going to like. But that's what we would need to do if that's incorrect for you. Hopefully it's not. So with that 5 to 20 minutes a day look at the monthly labor forecast, there's really 2 outcomes that we see for this. The first one, probably the most important, is providing you visibility to discover and fix any labor issues as early as possible in the month. So we have a little bit more recovery time than we certainly did in the past when we were just looking at a P&L well far after the event has happened with no chance to recover on a given job. So finding those issues quickly in your organization, if they can be addressed within the current month, doing something about it. If they can't, at least positioning you with the information so when you get questioned by your boss, you have answers at your fingertips, and as Dick Curry said best, eliminating the need for the forensic exercise and the panic that tends to happen when that does come up. And then secondarily, providing a framework for making sure that our labor budgets are kept current and accurate. And this is also a process that will make it easier for you to update your budgets. We are showing the labor budget directly in the labor forecast, month labor forecast page, and that Excel export feature I was showing you in the explanation of how Hubble works is how we're going to do that. And so the process at 10,000 feet is that any other managers or even staff that you give access to the monthly labor forecast can certainly do an export of a budget record, annotate it with recommended changes, and forward those to the general manager. And then the general manager, if they choose to approve that, would forward it on to the operations support group, which would be Jade and Joe, who would then go ahead and make those changes for you in JD Edwards. And of course, the GM can do those as well here herself. And then they would go ahead and update that in JD Edwards. The changes, as soon as they're made by Jade or Joe, will show up immediately in the monthly labor forecast. There's nothing that you need to do. And we'll actually walk through how to do this, but that's basically the idea is they've been instructed, Jade and Joe have, that they are only authorized to make changes to budgets if it comes from an email from the GM. As I mentioned before, this is really intended for operations staff. It's providing you a real-time forecast. This is for your hourly workers only, and it's for the current calendar month. So salary labor is not shown here because it's not coming from ePay, and we're not using the salary budget either. So we're looking at the hourly workforce actuals versus the hourly workforce budget in this particular workspace. So at a high level, kind of at 10,000 feet, the features within this is we're looking at our fixed and square foot jobs together. We're looking at our contract labor spend by category as well as by day. And I'll explain what the categories are here in a bit, but it's kind of a summary view at a job level and a summary view by day across your book of business. You'll be able to see your projects that are over budget at a glance and be able to drill down to those. Your jobs that don't have a budget, you'll be able to see your contract overtime percentages as the month moves through, and then see all your spend for work order time against your contract jobs. And then for your non-fixed and square foot jobs, which would include attendance billing for events, cost plus jobs, service day jobs, loaded rates and progress billing, those are all grouped together. And for those jobs, we basically lump all the labor spend by category and day, and then you also can get the jobs without budgets. And then finally, the third piece is providing a page that shows your production rate for all your janitorial jobs. And we'll go into this in more detail. This is just really to make sure you're familiar with what's in here. The drill downs, so you don't have to find them yourselves. Anytime you're on a list view and you're looking at a company level, you can right-click at that company and show all the projects within that company. You can show all the districts within that company, show all the jobs, or show the daily hours for that company across the board. When you go from company to district, you can then jump down to jobs. When you go from company to project, you can then jump down here to projects. At the lowest level, which is by project or by job, with projects, you can then go see all the jobs in that project, or if you want to see the timesheet. Now, if you go from project to timesheet, it's going to show you the timesheet for every one of the jobs within that project sequentially, and then a total for the project at the end. By contrast, if you want to see the timesheets for each of those jobs individually, you would simply select the jobs first, choose the job, and then look at the timesheet for that job. So if you go down by project, you're seeing everything rolled together at a project level. If you drill down to an individual job, you see these things, same elements, but for that specific job. So you'll see timesheets, daily hours, or a labor budget, which are the three key components within the system. So real quickly on data sources. So where does this stuff come from? Well, really it includes really three types of data. We're bringing actuals, a new term called averages, and then the budget. So the actuals and the averages are pulled from ePay, both from the ePay timesheet, which is where time for the current period is being entered, and then manual timesheet, which is where any correction checks, back pay, etc., are entered. Whether the hours go in as back pay or they go in directly into the timesheet, it's looking by the day that the hours were coded to and pulling those in for actuals. And then the same thing for the averages, and I'll explain the averages in a bit, so I don't want to confuse you at this point. And then we pull the labor budget from the J.D. Edwards operating budget. Again, we're only looking at hourly workers in all three of these. Now, when you connect into the monthly labor forecast, we're really going to show you actuals from the start of the month. So in this case, we're in the month of July. So it'll show you actuals as of right now from July 1st through July 11th. And then it shows you an average labor spend by job through the end of the month. So it would show you the average, and this little table down here kind of gives you an idea of what it looks like when you move through the month of May. So when you connect in for the first time, say on May 1st, it's going to show you the average for every day of the month, showing you May. When I come in 3 days later on May 4th, without you having to do anything other than just log in, it's going to fill in May 1st and 2nd with the actuals from ePay, and then it will show you the averages again through the end of the month, always totaling up to what we call the forecast. So the forecast is a combination of actuals through 2 days ago and then averages through the end of the month to come up with the forecasted number of hours, forecasted number of dollars for the month. And then we contrast that forecasted number against the operating budget based on the number of calendar days in the month, and then determine a variance. So when I come in on the 6th, then it's going to fill in the actuals for the 1st through the 4th, and then finally when I get to the end of the month, it's all actuals. No questions yet, Christian? All right, very good. Hopefully I'm not losing you guys. Anybody dropped off or fallen asleep? So the actuals I mentioned are pulling from ePay. The one key thing about actuals, I guess, worth mentioning is you all know Christian has been working feverishly, both he and Tiandra, to help drive ePay compliance. And prior to having the monthly labor forecast, ePay compliance was really all about making sure we don't end up in some kind of a Department of Labor lawsuit or have some unions choking down our necks. But now there's real operational benefit for all of you. It's important that we have time in ePay as accurate as possible and it be done as timely as possible, because you're looking at labor basically from 2 days ago. So we need to make sure that if we're sitting on, as we are today at Wednesday, that hours for Monday, July 11th are complete, meaning that if we had any open punches, they're no longer open. So if a guy punched in and didn't punch out, somebody between Monday and Tuesday went in and put in that person's punch-out time. We really have to work on minimizing manual time, because typically manual time, which is time when employees not punching in or out, somebody's just adding their time directly. This is a real problem here, because if that stuff's usually entered at the end of the work week or at the end of the pay period, which means if you're looking at this every day and making decisions on how a job's performing based on the hours you're seeing in there, thinking everything is just going fine, and then the following Tuesday, somebody in your team goes ahead and adds 16 hours a day to a job that you had no visibility to, you're looking good, and then all of a sudden you're really upside down. So getting those open punches cleared every day, taking extra steps to get clocks, get phones, to minimize this manual time is critical. And the last sort of subtle one is when we're doing the forecast, we're looking at contract hours. So you have somebody fill in on a job. Maybe you've got a floor tech come in to do some special work on a job for a billable work order to a client, but they just punch in and punch out of that job, and nobody has coded those hours to a work order yet. Until those hours are coded to a work order, it's going to appear as if the contract hours on that job are over budget, because it's going to look like contract hours. So very critical that we take care of these three things if we can, by the end of the next business day in order for this information to be meaningful to you. So you can be very confident that the information is accurate that you're looking at and not get surprised at the end of the week or the end of the pay period when all of a sudden a bunch of hours show up. I mentioned the average, and so this is how we calculate the average. And the way I would really recommend you think about this is when you open up that dashboard on the first of the month, the message that it's really saying is, hey, if I ran this job on average the same way I have for the last 5 weeks, this is how I'm going to do for the month before the first, before the first bucket is pulled out. And the way we calculate the average is every Thursday evening, or really morning, I guess, at 12:15 in the morning, we look from the prior Friday night back 5 weeks, and we calculate an average for every day of the week of hours and dollars worked. So we don't include PTO, we don't include non-work time. It's only looking at regular overtime, etc., worked hours, if you will, that are not coded to work orders, and it comes up with an average for Saturday, an average for Sunday, an average for Monday through Friday, each one of the days of the week. And then what we do is we look at the month of July, for example, and when we're populating tomorrow as an average, because it's a Thursday, we're going to use whatever the calculated average for that job was on Thursday, and then Friday will be or the 15th will show Friday, and so on. The only exception to the averages that we calculate is if in a given month there's a holiday looking forward and the job is set up for no pay on a holiday, instead of seeing the average on that day, you'll see 0 for that job, 0 hours, $0. And this is all set up in the job budget as well. Every job has a holiday calendar against I think it's 9 or 10 company holidays, and there are settings to say whether this job there's no pay in this job, it's a regular work day, it's premium pay, etc., as well as are all my employees applicable for this particular setting. So in these three examples, if the holiday was no pay, then on that day there's going to be 0 hours and $0 in the forecast for that day. By contrast, if it was premium pay, in this case let's say it's time and a half, the hours would still be the same as whatever its calculated average for that day would be, but the amount would be increased by 50%. On the other hand, if not all the employees were working on the holiday, and that's again a setting in your labor budget, so I've got 10 guys in a job, but on Memorial Day we're only running a 2-person staff, maybe just the porter and someone else is working on that day, and let's say that that job averaged 80 hours in a day. We would take 2/10 of that 80 hours, so you would see 16 hours show up on that holiday, and if those 2 employees were expected to be paid premium pay, it would take whatever that dollar amount was, take 20% of it, and then multiply it by 50% to come up with the premium pay for those 2 employees in your forecast. Any questions, Christian? Okay, good. The last piece is the budget. So we pull the budget from what's called the OB ledger, operating budget ledger, out of J.D. Edwards. Now typically, because we're driven by finance, the budget in J.D. Edwards, when you include the labor accrual factor, basically calculates a 21 3/4 day budget. That's how you level out the month. The reality, though, with the monthly labor forecast is we are looking at specific number of days in this particular month. And in this example, there's 21 days in July. So we actually, in calculating what the budget should be for this job, we adjust that budget amount based on the number of days in the month. So in this one example, if we had gone with the regular J.D. Edwards budget, it would have showed 2,175 hours for this month. The reality is the budget should only be 2,100. And so it adjusts it down the same way on the dollars. And in August, this same job would have a 2,300 hour budget, and in September with 22 days would have 2,200. That's a simple adjustment we do based on the number of work days in a month to adjust out that leveling factor. The challenge we would have if we didn't do that is we'd be cruising along in July the entire time, thinking if we're running this job right on plan, it would look like we're $750 off for the month, even though we're still running $1,000 a day as we were supposed to. On the other hand, if we look at August, we'd be running it right on plan. We'd be at $23,000, but the budget would only show $21,750. It would look like we were running the job over when in fact we're not. So this makes sure that it realigns everything for that purpose. When you drill down to a timesheet through the monthly labor forecast, we've color-coded all the rows to make it easier for you to quickly identify things like PTO or non-worked hours or overtime or anything coded to a work order by simply color-coding, bolding, or italicizing that timesheet row so you can see it very quickly instead of having to squint and figure out what's what. It's all based on the pay type in ePay. So everything that shows as work time, with the exception of this back pay, which shows up in gold, but regular current period work time will show up in white. The gold will show any back pay. So that'll help you catch it if somebody's added some time because they didn't get paid in a prior period. And then if the line shows up in red, it's for non-work time, like training, holiday, AB pay, birthday, bereavement, floating holidays, etc. And then blue is your PTO, vacation, sick, etc. And then finally other, which would be like mileage reimbursement, uniform reimbursement, or parking, for those of you using that feature in ePay. And this is just a reference to what general ledger account these things go to in the name for your reference. And then what I'm sharing with you here is because a few folks have asked, why do we separate fixed and square foot jobs on one page and cost plus and other jobs on a separate page within the workspace? And I think this example right here probably illustrates it best. So imagine I've got two jobs and they were both on the same page. One's a cost plus job, one's a fixed fee job. The cost plus job has a budget of $15,000. This month it's running $14,000. So we're $1,000 ahead on our labor budget. Same token, we got a fixed fee job that's got actual labor of $5,000, a budget of $4,000. So we're $1,000 behind. If we did this and these were together, this would roll up and everything would look rosy. Hey, we're doing fine. We're right on plan. No, we're not, because this $1,000 that we are doing well are below. It's actually not even a good thing. But on the cost plus job, we're $1,000 below our budget on labor. Does not make up for the $1,000 that we're over on the fixed fee job. And in fact, it's even worse than that because we're actually have $1,000 overspend, and then we're going to lose another $50 in revenue on this job because our labor's lower. So that's a reason why those are separate. Now for janitorial jobs only, we do calculate the production rate. It's just a quick explanation of what's involved in it. And again, you can refer to this later. We're looking at contract jobs that have a line of business of janitorial that are active. For those contract jobs, we look at all the hours worked to date in the month as you move through the month. We exclude anything coded to a work order. We only look at worked hours, so we don't look at PTO or non-work time. We include all janitorial tasks except for porters and cleaning other. So we exclude porters for obvious reasons. Cleaning other might include a DM that might be being costed to the job, or could include maybe an administrative person who might be working on the job, etc. So those hours for those tasks are excluded. These hours are all included. And then if you have a full-time cleaning supervisor, not necessarily full-time, but somebody coded to cleaning supervisor 512, we discount their hours by 50% in the production rate calculation on the presumption that they're spending half of their time on average. Again, this has to be done company-wide, but half their time is on production cleaning of some sort, and the other half is on supervision. On some large jobs, clearly that's not the case, but this is something we worked out with Dick and came up with that as a way to, according to him, our cost sheets are typically bid that way as well. But we pull the square footage from the budget. The vacancy for that job is also in the budget if there is one. So we calculate the square feet by that simple math. We count up the number of days that all these hours worked included for the period, and then just take the calculated square feet times the number of days divided by number of hours worked. So, 50,000 square foot building, 5 days divided by 100 hours would determine your production rate. And I'm going to go in the demo now unless anybody has any questions before I move on. No? All right. So I'm going to log into Hubble. And this is the hub I was referring to before. This is that notifications bit. So if you haven't done that before, you would simply click on that, and that's how you would open up a workspace. Right there. So if I wanted to open up revenue analysis, that's precisely what I would do. It's not what I want to do right now, but I just wanted to demonstrate that's how you would open up a new workspace. But I want to look at the monthly labor forecast, so I'm going to choose that guy. And if you see this little thing spinning here, this is what I was referring to. It's loading the data for all those metrics sitting behind these pictures. It'll take a second here for this thing to refresh. While it's doing so, just remind you, this is the hyperlink for the guide that I just went through, both of them, the first one and the second one. And opening up that monthly revenue one might have screwed me up because I haven't opened that one before. Probably shouldn't have tried something I haven't done before. You see this one here just finished. Now keep in mind the data I'm sharing with you is across the entire company. So you will see data for your particular district or your company only. And as I mentioned before, if something is missing, some jobs or whatever a district is missing from your list, just let us know. We can get your access in GD Edwards updated accordingly. So as soon as it stops spinning, you'll see the picture refresh, and then you're ready to go. So all these guys have already finished. It's still going through the projects real quickly here. And the last one is being a little naughty here. What we have on this page, this is a quick snapshot for company-wide, again, of what our forecast is for all of our event, cost plus, loaded rate, progress, and service day billing jobs for our labor. So at this point, if you look at this from your viewpoint when you're in your dashboard, if you see a negative number here, that means we are over budget by that amount. So we're running $362,000 behind our budget for these types of jobs. This bottom bucket here is looking at our fixed and square foot jobs. So right now for the month of July, as of July 13th, with actuals through the 11th and forecast through the end of the month, we're just under $300,000 ahead of plan. That's how you can read that. Now, complementary to both of these, over on the far right-hand side, are worthy of note. I'm going to just drag that guy over there a little bit. Whoop. Anytime you want to shrink any of these guys, you can simply do that. Just click on your left mouse and you can drag this thing one way or the other once you're in the center. And you can do the same thing if you want to make the bottom row a little taller, etc. But it's just a side note. So these are the panels I was referring to before. So I'm on page 1. And since I did cover this, I'll just click here and show you. This is how I get to the table of contents. So I can see production rate is on page 5, work orders are on page 4, cost plus jobs are on page 3, and fixed and square foot jobs on page 2. I'm currently on page 1. So that's the table of contents I was referring to. This is the title up here, of course, and then down here is the page navigation. But as I already mentioned, these two metrics are showing you your kind of total roll-up variance for your fixed and square foot and then your other jobs. Your other jobs are also represented over here And what this says is my jobs without budget. And actually, I've got these things in reverse order right now because I've been playing with this, but this is my fixed and square foot jobs. So right now I have 70 company-wide fixed and square foot jobs that don't have a budget. And the forecast for those jobs is $400,000. So the reality is, in fact, I'm going to put this the way you guys will see it because that one is really down there. These kind of go together, these two guys. So I have 70 jobs, $400,000. Really, if you add these two numbers together, that's where we're at. Because if every one of these jobs had a budget, it would certainly be similar or close to what we have in the forecast. When we started this process, there was over 325 jobs that didn't have budgets. And so thanks to a number of the operators that have been in here using it and communicating with Jade and Joe, just over the last 3 weeks, this number's dropped from 325 jobs down to 70. And hopefully over the next 3 or 4 weeks, this will go down to close to zero. But then we have 58 jobs, cost plus jobs, that don't have a budget, and their forecasted labor spend is just under $700,000. And this number has also dropped from close to 100 down to 58. So this is an ongoing exercise, and as more and more operators are getting in here and finding these exceptions are getting corrected. But that's what these two guys represent. So over here is showing you how are my cost plus and other jobs doing, how many of them don't have a budget, and what's their forecasted spend look like. And then the same thing here for fixed and square foot jobs. How am I doing, and how many don't have a budget? These other two in the middle, this one's probably the most important, and color-coded yellow or gold for a particular reason. When we get into the summary, which I'll show you in a moment, anytime you have a project or a job that is over budget, it'll be highlighted in the forecast column with this color. So right now there's 268 projects company-wide that are forecasted to be over budget to the tune of $426,000. This one here is showing you your current overtime. So right now, company-wide, for our fixed square foot jobs, we're running 3% overtime across the company. I'm going to come back and drill down on some of these in a bit, but I want to explain all of them first, and then we'll come back. I'm going to take a look at page 2 now, which is actually where I'll probably do my drill down. This page 2 here is showing you by company, and for most of you it'll probably just be a single row. It will say company for you, but if you're just in a district within a company, the total will represent basically your district. It'll still show it at a company level, but it's just showing your data. So that gold I was referring to before is represented here. So everything that's negative is highlighted in gold. That's called conditional formatting. This is a list. So to illustrate those drill downs, this is probably a good place to do that. If I'm going to go ahead and use Dallas for my example, or maybe actually I'll go ahead and use Tucson since Mr. Howie's on the phone. I did that yesterday. Let's try Dallas. So if I want to drill down on Dallas and see how Dallas is performing, I simply go to the row here, have my mouse highlighted over Dallas, click the right mouse, and it brings up my menu. At this point, I can go look at the districts in Dallas, all the projects in Dallas, or individual jobs. I'm going to go ahead first and choose district. And depending on your level in the organization and how you look at things, one may make more sense than the other. As I click on that, it's now going to go and pull back a summary by district for all the districts in Dallas. And in here I can see in the central district there's 4 jobs, and that's how I'm looking. I'm 20% ahead there, 10% on this job, or these sets of jobs, these 11 jobs, and 9.9 here. While we're here, I'm going to explain the categories actually. So let me do that. And the categories are those same columns that I showed you in the when I was showing you all the pay types. So what you've got here is, here's all your actual other time. This is PTO. So there's your budgeted PTO, your actual PTO. Here's your budgeted non-work time and actual non-work time. Here's your budgeted work time, actual work time, and then your overall budget and your actuals overall. And then we take the actuals, as I mentioned before, in this case through the 11th, and then we forecast this up through the end of the month, and that's what's in the forecast. So then this variance here is taking the budget of $412,000 less the forecast and showing that we are $16,000 for Memphis ahead of plan, or 3.9%. And let's see here. So getting back to that, by virtue of my drill down, as I did before, I brought out the districts. Now from Central Dallas, if I wanted to look at those 4 jobs, I can then drill down one level lower to see if any of those jobs are causing a problem for me. And probably not, because everything looks to be pretty good. Now I can see my 4 jobs, the billing type, and my variance for each one of those, and that breakdown. At this point, if I wanted to look at the timesheet, I can go ahead and click on the timesheet, and it's going to show me the timesheet for a security row. And this gives you a little sense of the color coding. So because this was a non-worked holiday, it stands out in red. You can see the overtime standing out in bold for this particular job, and it gives you totals. We get totals by day for the 1st, the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th for the month. Now, to illustrate how you do the breadcrumbs, if I want to look at something else about this job, I don't have to start over. I can just click right here. Now I want to look at the budget for this job. And now I can see security row has 1 employee, a porter, 40 hours a week at $10.50 an hour, and we've got 1 supervisor in there for a little over 2 hours a week, probably spread across those jobs. At this point, I'm going to illustrate how you would export this to Excel, and also how you would report or forward that Excel spreadsheet to Jade or Joe to go make a budget change. So let's just say, for the sake of discussion, that I really wanted to modify this budget for the cleaning supervisor, and instead of 2.36 hours a week, I'm going to make it an hour a week. All I would do is click anywhere in the list. You'll see the little dots appear in a second, and you'll see the menu appear over here. Go right over here, save to Excel. I get that little pop-up that I had shown you. I click download, and see down here in my lower left-hand corner, my tray is the Excel file waiting for me to open. If you're in Internet Explorer, you'll see that open save thing pop up down here. Now I'm just going to open it up in Excel to illustrate it looks exactly the same way it does in Hubble. And the way we've been instructing folks to make the change is, say I want to change this line, as I mentioned before, from 2.36 hours, to make sure that when the folks that are looking it up see the same thing you did, all I did is highlight this row, and I just hit I hit Control-C to copy it if you're familiar with Excel. It came down to a blank row, hit Enter, and I would just type in here, change, supervisor to 1 hour a week, and come right in here, change this to a 1, and then it's highlighted in yellow so it's really obvious to them, and just hit File, Share, Email, Send Attachment, and I'm going to email it to myself for illustrative purposes, but if you're not the GM, you would email it to your GM, probably with a little explanation here if that was necessary of why you're doing it. We had an increase in coverage or lost a floor or whatever it might be, and then they would go ahead and approve it, and forward the email on to Jade or Joe to make the change. That's an illustration of how to export, as well as the proper process for reporting a budget change. At this point, if I want to close all of this and return back to my original view, I just simply click on the Lex here. And then we'll look at a couple of other drill downs. I'm going to go into Corpus Christi now, and instead I'm going to go by project. So we'll look at some of Sharon's stuff here. I remember hers is pretty clean, as I recall. So now what it's doing is it's bringing up all the projects in Corpus, and again, to to really help stuff pop off the page for you, the variances that are upside down, even though they're not large, show up in yellow. And you can see this job here, HEB, is 9% off. That might be one we'd want to look at. I can see there's 3 jobs in that project. So if I wanted to explore those guys, I can right-click and now see that same report, but broken out by those 3 jobs in that HEB project to see perhaps where the issue might be. And it's probably holiday pay or something.
Anthony, real quick, a question came in about changing amount. So when we're making changes, are we changing the dollar amounts or the total hours or both? Or
if you need to change the hours, yes. You change the hours and the rate. You wouldn't need to change the amount, just the hours and the rate. Or the rate, yeah. That's a good question. Sorry about that. I mean, at the end of the day, just making sure whatever you're sending them is really crystal clear of what you want changed. I wouldn't say there's any real perfect way to do it because you're obviously in Excel, but I would suggest being as obvious as you possibly can as to what you want done. I can see here, however, on this job, having drilled down, thank you for the question, by the way. This job right now is budgeted for, where are we at here, $381, and we're forecasted to run 530 with 144 to date. So if I wanted to see why, I'm going to show you a different drill down we haven't looked at yet, but this is hours by day. And this also will really give you an idea of how the averages work, because you'll be able to see this visually, I think, quite nicely. This shows you the full 31-day month, and only populate based number of months or days in the month. But so now I'm looking at this particular job, and it's showing me my hours from the 1st of July through the 31st of July. And again, since we're on the 13th, it's showing me actuals through the 11th, and then forecasted from the 12th onward. So, I don't know whether this job works every day, but if in fact the 4th looks like it was a holiday, of course. So this may be a case if this job is supposed to have hours on the, what is the 8th and 9th? Is that that's a weekend, right? Of course it is. So the 11th, perhaps, whoever was working on this job didn't punch in, or maybe we don't work on that day. I'm not sure. I'm sure the operator would know. But what you see here is the 12th was yesterday, which was a Tuesday. So this job's been averaging 3 hours on a Tuesday, 3 hours on a Wednesday, 3 hours on a Thursday. Is that right? Yeah. And so Friday the 15th, is that right? Yeah, so hasn't been averaging any hours on a Friday or Saturday or whatever, but you can see the pattern. Just guess what I'm getting at based on how this job has been working. And at that point, you have the ability to go to a timesheet as well. So we can take a look at the timesheet and see what we've got there by day. Depending on, what would help you best to see it, but that's basically the process. And again, you can bounce back up at any point in here. So that's just a different way of looking at it. With the first one, I went down by district, then I went down by project. If I want to look at all the jobs, I could certainly do that as well. So if we go to Topeka, I can jump right down and look at every job straight away. It'll bring up all the jobs in Topeka. Probably recommend doing it by project or district first, depending on what level you're at, but this gives you a good snapshot. And I can see by category if I had any PTO, which I don't think we have any, a little bit in there. We can see $520 of PTO for one particular project. This might be a helpful view if you're concerned about some potential abuses or mispayments in certain areas. And again, this would be the similar kind of thing that if you wanted to export it to Excel, click on here and click there, and then click Save to Excel. But at this point, I can see I've got a job I might want to look at. Right click, and I do want to show one other view though. I showed the timesheet before. Let me find that job that's got a little bit of the PTO in it. This one here, like a little nifty little creature here, I think. I'm going to right click here and look at the timesheet for this job. I picked the wrong darn one. Kansas City Department. It's hard to see. I'm getting too damn old, Christian. You know what I'm saying? Oh, I missed it by one. So this Manhattan Tech College. If I look at the timesheet directly, you see the color coding. So this fellow here was on vacation for these days and a holiday here. Now, that's kind of nice. You get holiday pay and take vacation in the same week. But nonetheless, if you wanted to, you can see how it totals it up here by day. Well, if you want to drop this into Excel, it's going to be kind of a pain if you want to do something with it. So if you did want to just get the raw data instead of using the Excel version, when you go to do the download, I'll just pick a different job for the sake of discussion. But if you drill the timesheet with no totals, then it just brings the raw data in, and then you can drop it into Excel if you need to send this to a client or want to use it for analysis yourself using a pivot table or whatever you might do. Anytime you're at a job level, we bring in the company, the district, and the project, so you can refer back to that as well.
Now, Anthony, on that particular HEB account that we were talking about a little while ago, Sharon actually made a question. She said that she had OT in June. She's trying to figure out why it's still showing up and it's still showing that she's not running on budget.
Oh, I don't know. Which job was it?
Let me pull it back up here.
We'll do a little analysis here with Sharon live.
Sharon, I'm going to unmute you here. If you mind if just chiming in and telling us what the job number was?
It's the go back. It was the not the Westlaco account. It was the account in Harlingen. So go back to the HEB, and it was the one where they don't work. They only work 4 days out of the week. And it was off in June because the employee was out, and I had to have it covered by another employee that really threw the labor off. But that was only for one. We're really for 2 pay periods, part of one and 1 day in the following. So, but it's all been corrected. So
which one of these was it, Sharon? The first one, the second one, or the third one?
Was the one under mission, the third one. That's what.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think I could tell you why that's probably the case because, again, well, let's take a look at the actuals first of all. So if we look at the actuals for this guy, we'll see how the job is running this period, and that looks pretty clean, right?
Right.
3 hours a day.
Right.
And then when we look at the forecast for this thing, by looking at the daily labor, I think what's probably happening is, we're using that 5-week period average to come up with the forecast. So if you were running over in June, we're going to be picking that up as part of the forecast. So it may be, although it just says 50 hours is your forecast. Is your budget off?
No, the budget has been running correctly. It's just when I had that overtime, and I had a supervisor, so it really threw that labor real high because his rate is so much more.
Oh, I gotcha. That makes perfect sense. And so what's happening is the hours in the forecast are correct. The dollars are high because somebody else was working it during that period. So what'll end up happening in that case is as we move to the 20th of July, we're going to, every Thursday we're recalculating that. As you move into the month, the forecast for that job is going to go lower because it's going to use less of June and some of July.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
I was wondering because I checked it and it's running on budget. And the same with Sunrise Mall. I checked it and it was running on budget. And I'm like, why am I showing these off when they're actually running on budget? But it has to do with that forecasting then, where maybe we're off the prior month a little bit.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and that is a challenge here too. And if we pick too short of a period, then you could have one bad week would really skew the numbers badly. So we tried to pick a little broader period to level it out a little bit. But in a situation like you just described, there's kind of no way around that. and no way for us to know what to include or not include. But at least it got you to look at it. It's okay.
That does. Makes the picture always.
All right. So I'm going to go ahead and close this right here. This is basically looking at all our square foot jobs. I'm going to bounce over to Cost Plus to illustrate it. It's the same look. It's got all the same drill downs, just looking at a different set of jobs. So I won't need to go through the detail there, but if I want to look at our, this is showing us our, basically our work orders for fixed and square foot jobs by company. If we have a budget in there for the work orders, they're listed here. Most companies don't, but some do. So we could take a look, if we want to look in Dallas again, and right click, I can look at where the work order is happening and by what project. Again, and if you want to get all the way down to the timesheet and see that, probably useful if you're wanting to make sure that we are picking up hours for some projects we're working on. It's getting coded so you can make sure it gets billed. That might be helpful. If you're expecting, maybe you have a job that's running over, but you suspect it could be because there's work orders not coded there. You can find that out quickly here if you'd like. And there's Ingram there, and then we can go look at the jobs in that guy. So same idea. Here I got it, and I see, okay, all the work orders are in Ingram Brightpoint, and now I don't have it drilled down on that guy. I got to add that, but that's what this page is for. Just a quick visual of where you are with your work orders, and then finally the production rate page. I'll explain this gold color here in a moment, but before I do, let me explain what you're looking at. So you got the project, district, company. This one's done by job. We don't do any kind of roll-up for this, just a sequential list of all your jobs. It's only looking at your fixed and square foot jobs for cleaning tasks, again. And we bring in your billing type from the budget, your if it's a fixed job, your budgeted billing price. If it's a square foot job, your full occupancy budgeted price, and then your vacancy credit. If you have one in the budget, you can see one job down here that does. Here's a square foot job. From that, we bring in your square footage from the budget, back out your vacancy if you have one to come up with the calculated square footage. This tells you how many days were worked really through the 13th. So this job here is a 7-day-a-week job, for example. Some of these others have 7, 6, 5. But during those 10 days worked, there was 461 hours worked against this square footage, and then there's the production rate for that. And I'll qualify this whole page with it makes sense for some jobs, doesn't make any sense at all for others. The ones that are highlighted in gold right now are the ones that have the word day services or maid or porter in them, because they probably don't belong in this page. The reason that they're currently showing up is at present we have no way to flag those separately so they wouldn't show up. We just added a feature to the job budget so you can flag a job as a day porter, day service job, just so we'd have a good way to store that as a company, period. But also, once we set those, these jobs wouldn't show up in here. The reason they're showing up in here now is because we are not coding the labor to porter services, illustrated by the fact that if I right-click and look at the timesheet for this comma square, this is at least based on the job name, most certainly a day porter, but all the time is being coded to custodial services. And so the system doesn't know the difference, and it's just looking for any jobs they have the task custodian and using that as part of the calculation. So all you would need to do in this case is if you do have porters that are serving pure porter services, change their job, have their job title changed in JD Edwards or their default task from custodian to porter, and then they will be costed properly for one thing, but also will show up on the reports accordingly instead of showing up as a custodian and altering your production rate calculations. And I think That's really it. I'm happy to field any more questions if somebody wants me to look at something for them, or I will qualify one thing, and I know Mr. Ellis is on the line. Um, the as well as Doug with the Unigard, we're probably going to want to do some special work for both of your groups to create something more specific to events and Unigard specifically. So that's something we'll have Christian consult with you guys on, so we can do that. This is really crafted primarily toward janitorial companies. I mean, it's just bringing back labor, but I know, like I've talked to Trevor Bean already, like the forecast for events doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And so we need to make a little tweaks there, Chris, to make this more useful to you in particular. But at least it does show you your actuals without having to go into ePay and struggle trying to find them in there. So, any questions from anybody? No?
Yeah, there's no questions right now, but if anyone wants to either click on that little raise hand option, you can do that now, or you can just type in a question and I'll unmute you if you rather ask it. We have to do that. All right, so I have Ron Baum. I'm gonna go ahead and unmute you, and you have the floor.
Hey, I hope you can hear. Can you hear me?
Yes. You're on the air.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, you're on the air, Ron.
Okay. Here's a dumb question of the day. How does this information get into the system? Is it being pulled from Blue Force?
Yes.
Okay.
Not a dumb question. Not a dumb question at all.
Well, you know, I was really confused about this whole Hubble thing. I've been on it a couple times, and I think it's hard to use and quite confusing. So I've been through a couple of the webinars with it and everything, but unless you're actually doing it. This was a pretty good webinar, I will say that, because I did learn quite a bit about this system. So I guess that was my big question, is how does this information get inputted into the system? So
no, it's a great question, actually, and I'll elaborate on it a little bit. So basically, anytime a change is made in ePay, within 30 minutes, whatever that change is, gets replicated over to a database that Hubble reads. So it could be 5 to 30 minutes behind, but it's generally right on. So it's pulling from there, and it's also doing the same thing directly from J.D. Edwards for the budgets. And Ron, if you would like to have Christian or myself spend some time with you one-on-one going through it, or maybe you and a couple of your colleagues, we're happy to do that. I'm going to be out the next couple of weeks, but just send Christian an email. He loves doing that kind of stuff and helping people. We really want to make sure you're comfortable using it. It helps us learn, too, what we can do to make it better.
okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Huh?
Once again, if you have a quick question, you can always click on that raised hand option, or just type in unmute me or something on the questionnaire, and I'll be happy to do that.
Well, I think that might be it, Christian.
Alrighty.
Thank you, everyone. Christian, you got any final words? ePay compliance, you want to yell at anybody? No,
we're good right now.
All right. Thank you, everyone. You have a wonderful day.